What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the pièce de résistance of Street Pilots videos. A lot of you guys have harassed me about this. I've helped at least 3 of you guys via FaceTime with this, but now we're going to make a video for all of you out there that don't necessarily want to spend the cash to get somebody to install a 240 wheel, because you're going to be paying hourly labor. This is going to take probably a couple hours, and usually it adds a bulk of cost to doing a 240. The 240 is super simple to do by yourself. Really, you don't need much in tooling. You need a motorcycle jack, you need a 36 mil socket, you need a 27 mil socket, regular tools as well, and a impact gun, whether that is an electric plug-in one, whether it's like a Milwaukee battery one that I'm going to be using, or whatever. That's basically all the tools you need, and some modicum of mechanical knowledge. But I am going to try to walk and talk you through to make this install as seamless and as painless as possible. So what we have in front of us today is the skinny 150 stock wheel from Indian, and what we have going in is this big fat boy from HD Wheels to match up with our front set. So we are going to be swapping this into here. We're going to be doing it in this garage, and I am going to walk and talk you through it, and my camera woman is going to do the best to capture every single angle, as there is a lot of details, but they are pretty simple. So without further ado, let's get going. So the first step to taking this off, we have belt tension right now on the wheel. We additionally have an axle, and everything is nice and tight. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to back off your belt tension, and to make it simple, basically you have notch marks, you have a notch, you line it up to how you need it to be lined up so that your tire is all square. However, if you're worried about this, the easiest thing that I always do is I take a Sharpie, and the camera is going to zoom in, and I am going to make a line over here right on the top. This is my line. And as I unscrew this, every single time the line comes to the top, I'm going to count the amount of turns I loosen this, so that 1, 2, 3, etc., how many times I needed to loosen this off, so that when I tighten it back on, remembering the amount of turns off, I can put it back onto factory setting. Now with the 240 wheel, it may be different, and I may have to make slight adjustments, but however, before you need to go for wheel alignment or anything else, the easiest thing is that we're going to mark this side off, we're going to mark the other side off, and we're going to count the amount of turns we loosened it, and then we're going to tighten it back on the same amount. So we're going to begin by doing this with our trusty 13mm wrench, like so. So watching the mark, we're going to go, and every single time the mark comes back up, that's going to be a full turn. So, and I'm going to call the turns out loud so that myself and the camera can remember. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So about 4 on this side should be a good starting point. And then now I'm going to go to the respective other side. I'm going to mark it off with the Sharpie, and I'm going to do the exact same thing. So, one quick mark, and now we're going to go and loosen it off 4 turns as well. So, and 4. So 4 turns are off. Next. Now you could have done this afterwards, after loosening up the axle, but the next point we're going to do is we're going to remove this big axle jam nut, and then we're going to pull the axle out that way. However, before we do that, we need to remove the rear brake on this side to make sure that it doesn't scrape on the caliper. Now with this one, unlike the front one, I think I can gently rest it on the ground without putting tension on the brake line. But if not, just like on the front, we are going to strap it up, and we're going to make sure that we are not kinking or applying too much tension to the rear brake caliper. So what the camera is going to show you next is the 2 bolts right here on the bracket. I believe these are 15s. I'll just crawl out in the way for a second. 15s, 1 and 2, right there. And that will help us remove the brake caliper. So we're going to do that next. Why do you think I hit this is, as I will state in my other video as well, is because I don't like putting all my force down and maybe having the bike kick over. I'd rather have a short, impactful force to break it loose, and then I will loosen it off with a hand tool. Can you use an impact on this to loosen stuff? Absolutely. Again, when you're tightening though with an impact, make sure that you have some common sense to not over tighten things and strip them or break bolts, as I have seen some people do that. Now, in terms of having torque specs, again, refer to your service manual. As many as I can find, I will toss in here. However, I believe in just G&T, which is good and tight. Just like that, the brake caliper is out. And as you can see, it is already held up here by this little hold bracket. So since this is not too much tension, I'm going to let it float for now, and we'll see if I need to change it. Now, basically right there, this is all pretty simple. Next point is going to be to loosen up the axle with a 27mm socket, or that is, I believe, 1 1/16 inches. So let me grab my impact and a socket, and I will do that next. So here we have a 27. Now, the reason I have this one taped over is that I didn't have an impact socket on me at this time. Whenever you're using a chrome non-impact socket, they can crack, they can shatter, especially when you're going into bigger sizes and you're dealing with more torque. For them, when they break them, I've seen these things explode. So wear PPE, wear some safety glasses, use impact sockets because that's what they're intended for. But if you're in a pinch, what I've done before is that I will tape it over just in case that it does shrapnel. The tape will give me that split second of it keeping itself in. So let's do that next. Now the nuts on this side, and then the axle bolt is on that side. And sometimes, in some cases, to prevent the axle from spinning, we may have to hold it down with a wrench or some slip joint pliers. And in some certain years of Indians, I think it was before 2021, you will have a little C-clip here, which you will just pull out with a plier, which is your additional stopper to prevent this nut from loosening. However, in more recent models, I found that they don't have the C-clip. So let's get it off. Yeah, as I figured. So going down. No. So you're going to see my nice bum. And just like that, the nut is off. So if what you didn't see is that now, because I backed off the belt tension, my belt has come free. So what's going to happen next is that I can either back this off more and I can pull off as the camera moves over. I can pull the belt off from the pulley, or I am going to loosen this cover and I'm going to pull the belt from the sprocket, as that gear sprocket, since it's a belt, it's not really a sprocket, is easier to pull off there with the tension broken loose. So I believe these are number 5 Allens. I'm going to quickly pull off this cover and I'm going to show what is done there. So using a number 5 Allen, we're going to quickly pop off your belt guard. There should be 2 Allen bolts at the top, and then in addition, there's going to be 2 at the bottom. They are the same. They're the only 4 that are holding it. So correction, let me just make sure. Yes, it is only 4. So there's that. Now, because these have less torque, I don't mind just pulling on it. But again, because we're on a jack stand, whenever you're dealing with heavier torque, I advise giving it a little smack rather than using all your might and applying a lot of tension on it to pull something off.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is it something to consider when you're taking off your rear wheel to know if where you are on your jack? Will it tip forward if there's too much weight?
It could tip forward. You want to pick it up nice and flat. In some cases, I have lowered the bikes where the back end comes off, and you're going to see a lot more teeter towards the front, where you want to maybe sit it down that your front wheel touches. Right now, we're on the stoppers, so we're going to play it by ear, but that is an excellent question. Always make sure that you are using your jack safety and ensuring that everything is good. In your case, you also have a wheel chock, which you don't have here at the time, but the wheel chock will hold your front end nice and steady. However, it is not a necessity to have your wheel chocked. There we are. And this is your front gear, and we're going to slip the belt off. That's it. That's because we removed the tension back here. So now with that all off, we're now going to pull the axle. So the camera is going to reline up, and we're going to show you the next step. Now, we don't want to pull everything with the belt. It might be just making things more awkward. Now that we've have it off the front, we can just gently pull it off the pulley at the back. This belt guard is a little bit annoying and in the way, but as we get the wheel off, we're going to get out of it. So let me toss on some gloves so that I don't get absolutely disgusting before my dinner plans. And I am going to pull out this axle. Now, you would think that's basically it for the 240. However, there is a couple additional steps. So, again, take a look at the bum, and supporting it with one hand, we're going to pull the axle out. See, yeah, we are teetering. So we're going to push it back in. And we're going to lower the bike so that the front wheel touches and provides us a little more support. So with the bike in a more steady position, we are now going to pull this rear axle. Again, try to keep the axle out of dirt. Try to keep it away. So from any grime and crust. And just like that, right here, let's get this belt off. Wham, bam, Bob's your uncle. Wheel is out. Now, this here, what's going to happen next? Can the camera see? Is going to become the transference of parts. So the first thing that needs to happen is this pulley needs to get pulled off. I don't want to slap the wheel down on its rotor in the case that maybe I bend the rotor. So we're going to do this slightly awkwardly for the camera. But there we go. Pulley's off. Put the wheel down there. And then you need your push drive. This will also transfer over to the new wheel. What is a push drive? It gives you cushion from when everything gets power to it to make sure that you're not jerking and jolting all the time. Cushion. And now with that off, we can roll the wheel off to the side. And then now we can pop the other spacer out. And then we'll pop off the rotor and transfer that over. So the rotor, same as on the front, we're going to use a 10 mil, and we're going to quickly unscrew this from the bike. Now using a 10 mil, we are going to remove this rotor. So again, this rotor does state outside to the outside, so it's pretty hard to put it on backwards, but you will find a way. And if you find it tricky to pull off, they do use red Loctite from factory. They advise you to use red Loctite when you are replacing it back on. So we will also use red Loctite. Blue will work as well, but it's to ensure that everything is tight. So as stated, now we're going to remove the 10 mil bolts. So now with the rotor removed, we are done with this wheel. It can go in the trash. So with the rotor off the wheel, we have a couple other steps. So here's a couple points. First, the HD wheels kit will come with 2 equal tiny spacers. These 2 spacers are going to be for your right side shock to push it out to the right, as now the rear wheel is so much bigger, it will rub on things. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to push this shock out using these 2 spacers that are about just over a 1/4 inch, maybe 3/8 thick, to make sure that the shock sits wider out. Next, this is for later, is we're going to have a spacer for the gear at the front. It will go behind it to push the gear out further to the right so that the belt can go further to the right. In addition, we'll have this spacer here. This one is going to go into your pulley, which is right here. This is going to go into your pulley to push your pulley further to the right side. So this spacer here, on some bikes, will come off nicely. On most, like this one, it doesn't want to come off nicely. So we're going to have to carefully pry it out. And I will demonstrate how we do that. And then, in addition, we will have this last spacer, which will play in conjunction with the spacer on this side to push everything over to the left. So the wheel and setup is going to go a little to the left, and then the shocks is going to give you more clearance on the right. So without further ado, we're going to demonstrate how that's done. All right, so one of the hardest parts here is going to be getting this little spacer out. In some cases, it comes out nice. On my bike, it didn't come out nice. On some other ones, it might not come out nice either. So what we're going to have to do is a little bit of a surgery. We're going to have to try getting under it and pulling it out. So this one is essentially the same thing as this one here. It is on the bottom here. It's a little bit of a lip. You can get under it and try to pry it out. You don't want to wiggle. You don't want to wiggle and jiggle it too much, as you don't want to damage the bearing that's underneath it, and also it just becomes a pain in the butt. So let's see if we can work our way around it and get it to come out without breaking these screwdrivers. Pry bar here, a really tiny pry bar would really help, but everybody has their own ways of getting these out. Sometimes I've been able to really get them with some slip joints. I haven't had to do many of these, so we're just improvising, and we're going to work our way around it and try to get it to pull up, because we need the slimmer spacer, otherwise everything won't fit. So within about 5 minutes, we got it out. So as you can see here, this is the factory one. This is your new one, much skinnier. Its camera is capturing that. So what we did here is, obviously I'm not going to put this all the way back in here. I got a screwdriver in on one side and a screwdriver on the other side, and while one was applying tension upwards constantly, you can use a pry bar too. I would use the other one and I would hammer it down, which caused it to pop up. When I was trying to do it with just one, it wasn't really working, as I was just rebounding and vibrating through it. As soon as the opposite screwdriver was able to apply constant tension, it basically used like a spring method to build up a bunch of tension and just pop it out. So that's how we got this one out. And now this really nice little slim guy will go in its place. Done. Yeah. Next, the important part. You have a factory spacer on this side, and this factory spacer here will stay with the cushion, with your pulley, and will transfer over to the new wheel. So do not forget to remove it in case it gets stuck to your wheel. It may, but in the case, always verify that there is still a spacer on the inside, as this one will go to your new wheel. And then we are going to install the pulley on, and then we're also going to install the rotor on. It's a little bit easier on this big wheel, as now the wheel is so big that things aren't going to sit right on the ground. So I'm going to roll the wheel into play, and we're going to do that next. So the reason I put this down on the little mat here is to ensure that we don't scratch the slip surface. However, this is much easier on this side than it is on the skinnier wheel, as this brake will actually be sitting more inside the wheel. So again, line it up, make sure that the outside symbol is facing the outside, and the camera can actually zoom in and show where it says the outside. So if you want to bring the camera in, outside, right there, let's say outside, and this is to make sure that this face is outside and you don't have this flipped on backwards. Then what's going to happen next is we're going to secure the rotor back in. Again, use red Loctite. If in a pinch, use blue, but that's what they're using for factory. And then you're going to tighten these in a star pattern, and then you're going to tighten them, do one more pass around to make sure that everything is nice and tight. And the reason you do the star pattern is to make sure that your rotor sits down nice and flush, and to avoid any possible deviations of it getting pinched at a cockeyed angle. And now this is where, if you are the mechanic installing this, you kind of really want to pay attention so that your tools don't drop, you don't accidentally slip and gouge these wheels, as these wheels are pricey, and the HD wheels are by far one of the nicest wheels that I've worked with on these kinds of builds. Like, there's already a little bit of a grime spot, but that's just dirt from packing. You want to make sure everything's clean, everything is nice, and you want to ensure that you don't damage this wheel, as they cost upwards of $4,000 US for both the front and the rear as a set. If you do just a rear alone, I do not know what the price is. So this is probably the one-time priciest cost you're going to put onto your Indian Scout. So with all of those hand tight in, let's go around and let's get them tight. Perfect. Now, the next part is easier with the rotor being inside of the wheel, is we're going to flip it over, put it on its other face carefully, and now we got to install the cush drive. Now the cush drive is pretty simple. It has a webbing on it. It's a wall one piece, and you can see which webbing is intended to go on the inside and which goes on the outside. It really only goes in one kind of way, where you have your big pieces and small pieces fit in like so, and the upper webbing goes around your rim lips. So it goes there, it goes there. Sometimes, again, personal preference on the installation side, but if you give this a little bit of a quick spray with some penetrant, it makes everything bind up much less, as metal and rubber love to stick to each other. So I'm going to give it a quick little juicy thing with some penetrant, or gun cleaner in our case, right in between the rubbers. And the reason that is because we now need to put the pulley back on so it just doesn't bind. So is this detrimental to the rubber? I don't believe so. But again, I am not a liquid specialist. So we line this up, make sure it goes lined up, and we wiggle it in, up, until the pulley sits almost all the way in. And then there will always be a little bit of a gap between this, because it sits up above on the rubber mounts. So just like that, your wheel is prepped for the reinstall. Now, before we reinstall the wheel, the next order of business we have is we have to pull the right side shock, is we need to drive in the 2 spacers behind it. So in the case you're running other suspensions, as I do on my bike, my personal bike, I have R-Knot Air Ride, and that is so much fatter than the standardized shock that has additional spacers. So in some cases you might have a spacer on a spacer on a spacer. So just make sure that the length of these bolts does not run out on you, so that you are not just grabbing in by a thread because of how many spacers you're running. You might just have to upgrade your bolts. But in this particular case, since we're running for now a stock rear shock setup and we're just putting in a rear big wheel, we're just going to put the 2 spacers behind it. So let me grab a 17 and I'll get that installed. So without the rear wheel applying a lot of pressure onto pulling this swing arm down, and you're not having the weight of the bike on the ground either, these should come off pretty easily. So again, this is just 17. Ooh, so tight. I say they should come off easily, and then they don't, which makes me look silly. But so when it doesn't want to work with you, we're going to give it a little bit of love from the impact. There we go. And now, if these are binding, that means you still have tension on it. But because their swing arm is pretty much off of most of the weight, these should come off pretty nicely. So as you can see, I don't know if the camera captures it, so I'm going to let the camera get in here. Your spacing is already different from the bottom of the swing arm to the top from factory. So factory already adds a tiny little washer. Since these 2 washers are symmetrical and the same thickness, you don't want to replace this upper washer, because otherwise this shock will sit cockeyed as it needs this other washer in play. So what you're going to do is you're going to put one of these spacers in here, and then the other spacer with the existing washer at the top. So now it's your own personal preference whether you want the washer on the outside or the inside, whichever way you think looks best. I think since this side has, I'm going to have both spacers to the outside and the washer on the top side to the inside. There we go. And now gently start it back in. Again, if it's binding on you or not starting nice, you may have to adjust what's happening back here. But because your other shock is holding everything right now and all of the tension is off, everything should be pretty much relaxed. So again, washer goes behind, or a spacer, and then we're going to put in the shocks.
I always wondered how that worked.
So if you have tension from the bike sitting down, your spring is compressed, it's going to be fighting you. If you have the bike jacked up and the wheel is heavy, or you have a really rear heavy stuff, it is going to still kind of stretch the spring out, and it can pull up, apply tension downwards. That's why in our license plate video, I said to jack it up off the ground. Right now, you really don't have any weight except for this big piece of steel or aluminum, however, whatever it is on the bike. So it's not applying that much force one way or the other, but still something to keep in mind that if anything is binding on you, it's because there's some kind of tension that's putting the bolt either upwards cockeyed or downwards cockeyed. But when you can just move it by hand with ease, it's very nice and linear. Now, the thing here is this is the maximum you can fit. So in this case, you're moving on over accessories left and right to allow for the fitment of the wheel. However, if you went to a 280 or a 300, at that point you have a fixed point, which is your swing arm, and at that point you're going to have to start getting a custom swing arm to kick it out on either one of the sides. And then the other thing that happens is that your drive is also going to need to get pushed out. But at that point, because now you're pushing it out with a bunch of spacers possibly, you might need to change up your drive, because you're going to get, if you hold something like this, you're much stronger than holding something out this much further. So if your drive is much further out because you're now going into a bigger wheel, it can shear much easier because you're putting a lot of torque and tension on it, and it's further out and then closer. So then you might have to have an auxiliary components. I don't know what the engineered metrics are for what is a safe distance, but if you went to like a 400 tire or 360, whatever, you would have to start getting your drive also modified. But for now, because we're staying within the lines of the bike, we're really just minimally pushing components up, but the swing arm is the same. There's no big difference. Good question. I hope the viewers do like these auxiliary questions, because you guys can't really ask me them on the fly. Now, the next order of business is whether you want to keep this guard. Now, from what I understand is that I don't think you can keep the stock guard. It might rub, and we don't give a shit how it looks. So we are going to remove both the bottom belt guard and the upper belt guard for this time. So we need some what looks like Torx, and then the bottom should be Allen's. Now, thing is here, guys, is that make sure that this upper belt guard gets removed now, because these two bolts down here, these two, if the camera can see them, they are blocked by the pulley of the wheel. So if you forget to remove this and you set everything back in, you're going to have to pull the wheel to move this guard off, as these two bolts are completely blocked by the pulley from any other access, and you can't pull them out. So move this off now. So let's get the tools and let's get it off. So now we're going to remove the two Torx on the inside here. These are a T27, and then the one on the outside we have already removed in the past. So now we're just going to remove these two. So again, don't forget to remove this belt guard from the inside now. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to remove it after, or you're going to have to kind of do your job twice. There you go, one's off, and now we're going to remove this one. The bottom one is not a big deal if you don't remove it now, but you should remove it anyways. But that one can be done from the outside. So that one is an Allen, and I believe it's a number 5. So I'm going to grab a number 5 and remove that next. So again, to remove the lower belt guard, just 2 number 5 bolts. Now, is it safe to ride with no belt guard? I mean, you make that choice. Things can get caught into it, but when it's behind you where your legs are not placed, I personally ride like this. However, anytime you do any kind of modification and you leave cool things exposed that move, do it at your own risk. The big one that I would not keep exposed, especially depending on the kind of pants you wear, is the gear over here. But anything behind me where I'm not swinging my legs to the back, I'm not overly worried. But again, do at your own risk. I can't tell you what to do. I'm not your mom. Yeah, some or if not most of these modifications, depending on your state, province, country, city, municipality, whatever, could be illegal. From the Freedom Performance exhaust being extremely loud for Vancouver, to not having a rear fender or covering could be illegal, to having integrated lights could be illegal, to many things could be illegal. But in this case, as long as we're respectful, usually we don't get touched. But if you're going to be stunting a bike or being extremely aggressive at 2 o'clock in the morning, be ready for a bunch of tickets, because they will hound you for everything depending on where you live. Alrighty, next. So the camera will have to zoom in on this part. This is the next part we have to rejig and move. So we have this gear here, basically your belt drive. It drives the belt. The thing with this is that this right now, because everything is getting pushed and pulled out, also needs to come out via a spacer. So what we're going to do first is we're going to grab a number 4 Allen. We're going to remove the 2 little Allen bolts that hold your lock plate in place. What this lock plate does is to make sure that this big 36 mil nut does not come loose. Then we're going to put a 36 mil socket on it and impact it off. Why impact, you ask? Why not force it by hand? Well, you're on a rotating surface, and if you start actually forcing it, you're just going to turn the engine. So the easiest thing here is keep it steady and just impact it off. So this portion here is the one thing that, unless you're some kind of super trooper, I would recommend having a power tool for. You could try to grasp it with something and try to force it over. However, when you're trying to slowly force something, you are going to really end up just turning the engine. And in addition, I wouldn't try to pinch just by the teeth, because you might break the teeth. So use an impact for this portion, and we are going to use, again, a number 4 Allen to get those 2 bolts off. Cool. So it is a number 5. I was just a little bit on crack. I was using a number 6. So let's get these two off. So little pop. So these two lock, basically lock washer holding down bolts. They're not too tight, so pretty little. Their whole intention is to hold that ring on. There. It's basically an extra added safety to make sure that you don't lose that nut. Some places will use a C-clip, but in this type of build, that's what this is. It's pretty common, so if you're curious, come on, baby. There you go. It just basically has a star pattern, so it will hold this nut in the fixed position that it's tightened, and then you tighten it on within those two Allen bolts so that it just retains the position so this can't come loose. And then 36 mil socket. I don't have any 1/2 inch drive, so I'm using a 3/4 down to a 1/2 inch reducer. And as I said, if you're not going to give it a good brap brap, what's going to happen is that you're going to be fighting the engine. So let's give it a quick little brap. See? As you saw, without me even holding it, it wanted to start turning. So you're going to need something with good torque power, and these Milwaukee guns absolutely kill it. I brought it in from work, so that was pretty sweet. So then you just pop this off, and then what's going to happen next is you're going to put a spacer behind it, just so this pulley can sit a little further out for the belt. So this is the spacer. It slides right over. Then now your gear is going to go back over it, and it does not have a master spline. What is a master spline, if you ask, is that there will be one spline that's different. On this case, all the splines are the same. So what's going to happen here is that you can put it on any direction. There's no effect. If I had a master spline, it would only go one way. You basically get it to line up, which it doesn't want to do right now. There we go. Then you get the nut, put the nut back on right away. And this nut, again, can go on either way. It is not coned or special in any single way. And then this is the part where it's going to be hard to torque this. There is probably a torque spec out there, but in our case, we get it to snug here, and now we got to drive it on. And considering how powerful this gun is, I'm pretty content with that. So again, Milwaukee M18, it puts out like somewhere to, I think, 400 torque. So this is more than good enough, and I gave it a couple of ugga-duggas. Now, to make sure it's safe, we're going to line up. You have the two bolt holes for those two Allens. You want to line up everything there, and then we're going to do next.
Question.
Yes.
Are there any signs that any riders could see if it wasn't tight enough? What would happen?
No, you'd probably be able to move this by hand.
Okay.
Or it'd fall off.
Okay.
Or you're.
So it wasn't like the bike would ride different or anything?
If your belt's about to come off, you're probably going to see like a lot of issues. If your belt's about to come off, your belt is probably due to the wear of stuff, and your tension isn't brought up right. More about these than that. For this to go, there could be damage. Like if this output shaft here is cockeyed, you could be riding funny, be pulling to one side. There could be weird things that are happening. However, on average, the rider doesn't see them often. I've seen on crotch rockets where your output shaft was bent, and that was from a misalignment or over-tensioning one side. I've seen that. And in addition, like your belt will stretch too. So this is designed to be durable, and the belt will stretch and break before anything happens to that, or it should. So therefore, seeing actual damage to this is not going to be right away, or it's not going to be super noticeable to the average Joe. If you do notice weird problems, obviously just go see a certified professional or somebody at least with a modicum of knowledge. So in our case, again, not worried about it. But if you ever are, like, when the bike is off, I have to really reiterate this, when the bike is off, you can see play here, or this is loose by hand. you got problems. But because this is behind a cover, most people will never pull that cover to check. Now, does this protrude less? Absolutely, it does have a washer at the back of it. However, you're grabbing more than a couple threads, so it is good and tight. So that basically completes the important part here. Next part would be slipping the belt back over and getting it all reassembled. However, we're going to go and address the back wheel next. All right, so here comes basically the last part here is we are going to put the wheel back in. Now, the kind of annoying part that we have to do on the other side is now that we have a double washer system. So you have your one spacer that's going to go in, but you also need to get this really tiny guy on. So basically you're going to put your axle through your swing arm, through your wheel. You have to leave a little bit on, fiddle this guy in, put the axle through it, and then put it through your caliper bracket and through to the other side. So it's a little bit of a tedious process, but again, super easy, super doable. And then the next portion here that basically I've addressed in my other wheel video, but I'll address it again. When these wheels come from factory, if you can see, they have a little bit of a sheen and a gloss to them. This is from when they pour the molds, so it comes out of the mold easier. It looks really nice on your showroom floor. However, this surface here, if you're a new rider and you're doing this right away, kind of like my client here, be aware that this surface is super slick and slippery. So make sure that before you start taking aggressive leans and you want to show off your bike, that you wear this off. A good burnout will help on the rear. Taking slowly into getting your leans and getting it equal wear across to get all this shine off. I've seen people sandpaper these, whatever you need to do. But if you're an inexperienced rider, these tires, especially in chillier morning weather, when you're in the springtime where it's nice to ride in the afternoon but a bit chilly in the morning, they can go right like butter in left-right turns or in an aggressive lean until you basically have gotten this sheen surface off. So just kind of a public service announcement for all those new riders. So make sure that you are paying attention when you toss on new wheels. And now basically the next portion is we are going to toss in on this new wheel and you get to see my bum again. Before you toss in the wheel, big suggestion always is to re-grease your axle, as when's the next time you're going to do it, and it is a good habit to get into. So what I just removed here on the other side is the brake caliper bracket. It just floats out and hangs out on this side over here. So we're going to have to squeeze that puppy back in. Again, all of this will fit. It just will take a little bit of finagling. So there you go. That side's back in. Now we're going to put on. The washer by my foot's the one that I gotta, once I slip through the axle, I gotta put it on that side. So that's going to take me a second, but first I need to slip in the axle and then I gotta get it in there. Get your belt over the pulley again. Then using one hand, or if you have a helper, using two, and your knees, get your axle started. Now, we'll put it there on an angle for now. Again, for the ease of the beginning of the install, this bracket, and I don't really think I need to show it because it's pretty simplistic how it goes on, and you can see it. But if my cameraman wants to show it, I don't mind. So it just hangs out here on this side over top of this, floats. So the axle will go through it to hold it. And then if you see this little notch, see this little notch? So that little notch there is where this part just rests on. So the only thing that really holds it on is your axle. So it hangs out here like this. So your axle holds it through, and then obviously your caliper kind of, well, more holds the caliper than the caliper holding it. Now, since we have that new washer, it's going to be a bit of a pain in the butt to drive that puppy in. Camera will capture this. This is the important point here is, yes, I was smacking this. It will come out through because it's, but if this side was threaded, once the threads start going towards the thread point, you don't want to smack it anymore. But in this case, it's just hollow all the way through. It's going to fit through, and then we're going to tighten on a nut onto it. But what we need to do is the annoying fiddle fuck of having the axle just protrude, so that then we can get this tiny spacer in. And now having everything lined up with that additional spacer, we're going to lift it up. There you go. Just that easy. So big thing here is, if the camera comes back, is just for those of you that will probably have this question. So I'm going to interject this into the portion where I'm speaking about this. I made a mistake. So the small slim washer, it actually does not go, if the camera zooms in or comes closer, the small slim washer, it does not go on the inside of the brake bracket. It actually sits between the swing arm and the brake bracket right here, to ensure that the brake bracket is spaced also equally. What happened is that I made a mistake and I put the washer on the inside, and then when I was spinning the wheel after the video was over, I could hear a really bad brake drag, as if something was wrong. I took off the caliper, and as soon as I did that, the brake sound was gone, which pointed me in the direction something's off, and I rechecked where that little small spacer goes, and it goes between the brake bracket and the swing arm. Now, this is very important, as if you have an RC components kit, it may install differently, and that's kind of what I was going off of. This is an HD wheels kit, so they have their own instructions. So just always be attentive and follow the proper instructions. Next, now that I'm going to come back to this side. Next, as you can see right now, with everything in here, we can have free play of the wheel. That's why our adjustment is backed off. And that will help us slip the belt right back over, like so, where we can now proceed with the adjustment. So first, we're going to get this in place. And now, coming back to this side, we can pull this back out to its proper way, how it was prior to. So again, we backed it off 4 turns per side. So now we're going to turn it in 4 turns per side. So going back to my mark. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. Should bring the right side back to its setting. Now we're going to do the same thing on the left side. So perfect. And now we are sitting in between these 2 notches here. And so the proper way to see it actually is, if the camera comes in, you really need to make a zoom for it. So if you see these hash marks on this square spacer, so, and you see how there's a little notch right up here. See this little notch mark right here? Yeah, so that's how you tell where you're sitting. So right now you're sitting between the 2nd and 3rd line. Then you check with the other side, and if you're sitting between the 2nd and 3rd line, or on a line or whatever, you can see that you're accurate on both sides. So right there, we brought it back right to factory specification, and even our belt tension's pretty nice. The wheel is back on. So now to finish this off, it is time to basically bring back in the last little bit of parts, which is in this case the caliper. Now, unlike the front wheel, you really are going deep dish here, and you gotta finagle your caliper in. So if you're afraid of scratching your rims, or you're working on a client's bike where you really think you might scratch them, tape off a good section with masking tape to ensure that you can get the caliper in without scratching the rim. But if you're a brave soul like me, you can get it on without. But again, for those of you who are not working on your own bike, my advice is tape it off and be safe so that you don't damage a client's brand new expensive wheel setup. So there you go. Make sure the brakes are nice and tight. That's one thing you don't want to lose. Shocks are tight, brakes are tight, axle is tight, front drive is tight. So the only thing left is now basically to replace your pulley cover. So I'm just going to do that, and which is the reverse. Now, I don't know why they have this, but at the bottom here, there's a little square washer on the front bottom one. I don't know why it's there, probably part of the design. But if you see a part drop that looks awkward when you remove it, that's what that part is. And again, these are number 5 Allens. You definitely need a new belt guard because this one is kind of fugly, but you've already spent so much. So if anything, this is the least of your concern. Basically, hopefully this helps you guys out. If you're worried about your alignment, get it back to how it was, get it pretty square, and then from there, take it to a shop, get it aligned. It shouldn't be too expensive, but it'll definitely save you time and money because I think we got this installed in what, an hour and a half? So pretty quick and dirty. And so next order of business is basically we're going to do a couple accessories, which is we're going to have to do the S&S intake. We have Joker Machine foot pegs, and then we have the Joker Machine black shift rod. So let's stay tuned for the next video, and everybody, I wish you guys ride safe.